this, are you? Traitors, mate, a lot of you. This is our country.
It is very important. They need to stop illegal migration into this country.
I think the current government is a disgrace.
London, a city known for its bustling streets, gleaming skyscrapers, and relentless rhythm, suddenly came to a halt in the echo of more than 100,000 voices. Central squares were overwhelmed, vital arteries were blocked, and images of riot police standing face to face with protesters quickly dominated global headlines. It wasn't just a day of protest, it was a reminder of how fragile an economy can be when its lifeline depends on stability. As crowds took to the streets to voice anger over immigration and government policies, the consequences reached far beyond chants and waving flags. Every delayed train, every shuttered storefront, and every canceled hotel booking created cracks in the economic fabric of the capital. And as the world watched, the question loomed: how much financial damage can a single day of unrest cause, and what happens if such turmoil becomes routine? London is not just a city, it is a global financial hub, a place where investment decisions and international capital flows are calculated to the last detail. Yet a single day of chaos can erase millions of pounds across consumer spending, tourism, and investment. The bigger fear is what it signals. If protests of this scale stop being the exception and start becoming a recurring reality, the consequences may stretch far beyond London's borders. To fully grasp the economic impact, we need to examine the social and political tensions that pushed more than 100,000 people into the streets. Post-Brexit Britain faces a series of challenges: soaring living costs, mounting immigration pressures, and a growing distrust in government leadership. London, as both the economic heart and the cultural crossroads of the nation, has inevitably become the epicenter of these struggles. Immigration has become a flashpoint. For years, London prided itself on being one of the most multicultural cities in the world. Yet the rapid rise in asylum seekers and migrant labor has sparked fears of job competition, strain on the National Health Service, and, above all, pressure on housing. When a luxury hotel was converted into temporary accommodation for asylum seekers, the backlash from local residents became a symbolic trigger for a much larger wave of protests. This frustration is compounded by a cost of living crisis. British households face record-high energy bills, food prices, and rents. For many, immigration has become the easiest scapegoat for hardships that stem from broader structural and political issues. London has witnessed massive demonstrations before, from anti-Iraq war rallies to tuition fee protests, and more recently, marches tied to Brexit. But what makes this moment different is the scale and intensity. More than 100,000 demonstrators, mobilized by polarizing figures, transformed what could have been just another protest into a seismic event, one that reverberates politically and economically. On the day of the protests, London felt the economic shockwaves almost instantly. Public transportation, the lifeblood of the city, was thrown into disarray. Underground trains ran late, dozens of bus routes were blocked, and commuters found themselves stuck in journeys that took twice as long. In a metropolis where every minute of lost productivity has a price, the delays translated into millions of pounds in reduced output within a matter of hours. In shopping districts like Oxford Street and Regent Street, many retailers were forced to close early to avoid risks. Restaurants and cafes, which depend heavily on weekend shoppers and tourists, reported steep declines in revenue. A Saturday that should have been one of the busiest days of the week instead turned into a financial loss. Tourism, one of London's crown jewels, took a direct hit. Images of massive crowds, riot gear, and tense standoffs flooded international media. Families abroad watching the news began canceling tours. Hotels reported a spike in last-minute cancellations, particularly in central districts. Even airport transport services saw a wave of ride cancellations, compounding the day's financial damage. These disruptions are measurable in the short term, but the larger concern lies in repetition. In a city so heavily dependent on services, one day of unrest may be survivable, but if such disruptions recur, the cracks in the economic fabric risk widening into permanent fractures. Behind the images of marching crowds lies a less visible but costly reality: security spending. To manage more than 100,000 demonstrators, London's police deployed thousands of officers, including riot squads, mounted units, and specialized vehicles. Every additional shift represented millions of pounds drawn from public funds. Then came the cleanup. Burned bins, broken glass, vandalized billboards, each required repair or replacement. Insurance companies stepped in to cover private damages, but rising claims will inevitably drive premiums higher for businesses already under strain. Hospitals and emergency services also bore the brunt, treating dozens injured in clashes between police and protesters. Globally, the financial footprint of protests is staggering. In the United States, the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests reportedly caused insured losses exceeding $1 billion, not even counting policing or cleanup costs. While London's exact figure is yet to be calculated, it's clear the tally is far from trivial. The real concern emerges if such events become cyclical. A ballooning security budget means trade-offs: more money for policing, less for education, healthcare, or infrastructure. What begins as a political statement can, over time, morph into a permanent fiscal burden on taxpayers and a drag on national priorities. Real estate in London has long been more than bricks and mortar. It is a global asset class. Investors from around the world park their wealth in prime London property precisely because of its reputation for safety and stability. But when protests spiral into clashes outside hotels and residential blocks, the cracks extend beyond shattered windows. They seep into investor confidence. In wealthy districts like Islington and Canary Wharf, residents voiced fierce opposition to the use of luxury hotels as migrant housing. Their concern isn't just social, it's financial. A multi-million-pound townhouse loses part of its allure if the surrounding streets are repeatedly associated with unrest. Perception, as much as reality, drives property values. Foreign investors are watching too. London competes with cities like Paris, Berlin, and Amsterdam for international capital. If political and social stability, London's strongest selling point, comes under question, those billions may be redirected elsewhere. The damage extends beyond property values. A city portrayed as unstable loses its luster in the eyes of tourists, students, and global talent. London thrives on being a magnet for opportunity and cosmopolitan living. If its image becomes one of recurring unrest, that magnetism weakens, and the economic consequences may linger for years. If protests were isolated events, their economic scars might heal quickly. But the true danger lies in normalization. Repeated unrest embeds uncertainty into the psyche of consumers, investors, and businesses. Consumer behavior often shifts first. Households facing uncertainty spend less on non-essentials, from luxury shopping to domestic travel. When tens of thousands flood the streets in anger, the underlying message isn't only political, it's a broadcast of eroding confidence in the future. And when confidence erodes, so does consumption, draining revenues across service industries. Foreign direct investment is another casualty. For decades, London has been the preferred entry point into Europe for multinational corporations. But in the eyes of global executives, social instability equals higher risk premiums. A new office, factory, or headquarters may suddenly look more attractive in continental Europe. Once capital diverts, reclaiming it is no small feat. Tourism, too, is fragile. Parents in America or Asia, seeing images of police and riot gear on TV, may quietly choose Rome or Paris instead of London. A sustained dip in international visitors threatens thousands of jobs in hotels, restaurants, and transportation. For the UK, the timing could not be worse. Post-Brexit, the government is eager to project confidence and attract global partnerships. Yet images of mass unrest undermine the very narrative Britain seeks to sell, that of an open, stable, and reliable economy. In this sense, London's protests are more than a local disturbance. They're a warning flare to Europe and the world about the risks of ignoring festering domestic tensions. Confronted with its largest protest in years, the UK government scrambled to contain both the physical disruption and the reputational fallout. Ministers quickly pledged tighter immigration controls, a review of asylum housing policies, and stronger policing in sensitive areas. But while these promises addressed immediate concerns,
they did little to resolve the deeper fractures driving unrest: high living costs and social division. The government must strike a delicate balance. On one hand, it needs to reassure investors and tourists that London remains secure. This requires heavier spending on policing, surveillance, and municipal coordination. On the other, a crackdown risks being seen as curbing free expression, undermining Britain's democratic identity. It is a policy paradox. Too weak a response, and unrest festers, eroding economic trust. Too heavy-handed, and the UK's image as an open, liberal society takes a blow. For markets and investors, both paths carry risk. The challenge for Britain is to navigate this tightrope without losing its economic footing. The London protests were not just a political flashpoint. They were an economic stress test. Within hours, the city's transport, retail, tourism, and public services absorbed millions in costs. Yet the real damage lies in what cannot be measured as easily: trust. Trust among consumers to spend, among investors to commit, and among outsiders to see London as stable and safe. If unrest becomes recurring, the stakes rise exponentially. The cost will no longer be limited to police overtime or broken shop fronts, but to billions in diverted investments and weakened national brand. In the global economy, where capital flows at the speed of perception, social stability is an invisible asset. Lose it, and you lose far more than balance sheets reveal. For those of us watching from afar, the question lingers: can the UK bridge its divides before instability hardens into reputation? Because if not, London risks trading its image of a financial fortress for that of a city in turmoil. If you want more deep dives into the economic and social forces shaping global events, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story.